There are people all around the world in every walk of life who collect and analyze information in an effort to keep themselves and others better informed and prepared. They are part of a profession, a discipline, a calling, a community, an industry, a bureaucracy, an enterprise. They practice a tradecraft, offer a decision advantage, and provide a public good. Their work is hidden behind classification banners, secure facilities, compartmented clearances, and big institutions with vast resources and capabilities. What they do impacts our everyday lives. This is intelligence. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you all for joining us today. We have with us Zalmay Khalilzad, former ambassador to Iraq, former ambassador to Afghanistan, former ambassador to the United Nations. He had a very long and prestigious career in the U.S. government, starting out in policy planning at State Department and at DoD, and serving at the highest ranks and the highest levels of the U.S. government. And the topic we're going to talk about today is the relationship between policymakers and intelligence. This is a topic that's been much discussed in the literature. There are countless books and articles talking about the need for better understanding between intelligence officials and policymakers, better education of policymakers about how intelligence works, what it should do, what it can do, what it might do, and discussions about politicization. When are intelligence officers too close to the policymakers, or should they be close to the policymakers? Is there a value to being close to the policymakers? None of these questions are settled in the debates. They're all in open discussion, and there are many different viewpoints. And so today we're going to get the views of Ambassador Khalilzad. Thank you so much for being here today, Ambassador Khalilzad.
Well, Josh, it's very nice to be with you. Good luck on this new product by the center. I look forward to our discussion.
Okay, if we can start then, I would like to ask, how valuable is intelligence? Does it move the needle on policy discussions?
In general, of course, intelligence is a key part of the national security and foreign policy elements of our power, as well as participant and contributor to decisions and the implementations of decisions to protect the national interest and the security of the United States. When we talk about intelligence, I think of several things, several streams of activities, and perhaps if you agree, we could talk about each, their contribution and challenges with regard to them based on my experience, both in Washington and in the field. One is information. In order to make decisions, information is a key part. Information about what you should be focused on in terms of importance, and what do we know about it, what we don't know about it, and how should we think about the issue. And that's through collection, overt, covert, technical, human, and if we don't have and the right information, we could be surprised. We could face a threat unexpectedly that we hadn't prepared for. And if we don't have the right information and understanding, and that gets me to the second category, then we could underestimate the challenge or overestimate the challenge, and decide on correct or incorrect courses of action. Of course, on the decision part, the intelligence community is an enabler and a participant, but not a decider. The decision is obviously by the policymakers. Second category is analysis and judgments, and it is taking the information, knowing the interests or the focus of policymakers, to analyze uh, 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 the situation, the conditions, the circumstances, to broaden and deepen and the policymakers' understanding of uh, the issues, the regions, the peoples, the parties, the forces, the decision-making process, and a whole range of things that affect what the policymaker is interested in, to broaden and deepen uh, 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 his or her understanding, so they make better decisions, hopefully as a result. And there is also sometimes papers written, the products that are just judgments, where things are, rather than an analysis. There is always a lot of uncertainty. It depends how much you know, how much you don't know, and the personal expertise of the authors. Uh, um, but judgments can sometimes be, or often are, involves a range of the agency that produces that product, or agencies and that all across the board. I mean, intelligence agencies, that we have several of them, quite a few. Sometimes they provide consensus documents in terms of judgment. Sometimes there are footnotes, agencies that disagree with one part of the overall judgment, and maybe a longer time framework rather than about immediate issues, because you have products that deal with the ongoing issues or current issues, and things that can play out over a longer period of time, such as how long will it take for X to produce a nuclear weapon or some other weapon that relies on what we know, and then makes, based on the analysis, some judgments. And then another category of intelligence is obviously covert action, or actions, which affects to a degree some of the other things that are being done, because the director sits on top of all of this. But that's an important instrument in, for example, in the war against terror. And they have a lot of operational capability and role, and they have had, in my experience, important roles in the war against the Soviets in Afghanistan, which was one of my first issues to deal with, and just supplying support to the people who were fighting the Soviets, and related activities, as well as in the wars after 9/11 of Afghanistan and Iraq. Uh, that is an under studied and appreciated, in my view, of how large a role uh, 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 the this part of the intel, the covert action part of the intel, especially the paramilitary actions and role, has been very important. So that's an overview of how I think about it. But obviously, we can talk about each of them and my experience with them, strengths and weaknesses.
Well, do you get on that last point? Do you find in particular that intelligence operations, operational work within intelligence, sometimes becomes policy and sometimes overshadows policy?
Well, I think the challenge is obviously someone in the hierarchy of policy making should know and likely does know what's going on in the uh, actions taken by the intelligence, in quotation mark, part of our system. Uh, but at times, people down the chain may not know what is going on, and to what extent what's going on in that chain is uh, in support of the other priorities or the general priorities, like an ambassador may be responsible for, or others uh, 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 in the decision making, or having responsibility overall for the uh, objectives at the national level for what we want to see happens, because the immediate priorities may be different, and what you do in one, let's say in operations, intel operations, uh, could require things or cooperation with elements that creates problems for what you want to achieve in the political track, uh, what you want to achieve in terms of where you want to move the country overall. So there could be a better reconciliation and coordination uh, uh, of activities between different stovepipes of, if you like, uh, 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 that have operational responsibility or overall responsibility to achieve uh, 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 an outcome overall. I'm thinking at a place like Iraq or Afghanistan, where I've had the most direct experience.
And speaking of that, because you worked in so many different war zones,
Yeah.
where the intelligence operations and the intelligence activities are can be very complicated, and the interactions with policymakers can be very diffuse on multiple levels, and it can be very hard to keep track of all the different activities going on in the different spheres. Do you feel that the U.S. government improved over time, that our operations improved over time, our coordination improved over time? Do you feel that that you became more effective in how you dealt with these issues over time?
I think that what we did, obviously, and there is direction from the headquarters, meaning from the president, from the Secretary of Defense, from the Secretary of State, from DCI. Uh, and there's also depends on the personnel in the field, the relationship between and the ambassador with the general who was running the conflict, since it was a war zone, and the station chief. And I was lucky uh, when I was in Afghanistan and Iraq, because I had a close relationship with President Bush. I had worked at his NSC. I had been his presidential envoy for both Iraq and Afghanistan before going to the field. I had known George Tenet because of the president, because I was in both cases. I'd been the senior director at the NSC for Iraq and Afghanistan, and so I would be the note taker in many of the NSC meetings, and I got to know the other principals, and they all knew that I was close to the president. That helped, obviously, their interaction with me, and I had known Secretary Rumsfeld quite well. I had been in charge of his transition to bring him in as Secretary of Defense. And I had known well, I knew General Powell quite well. We had both worked in the Pentagon during Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and with then Secretary Cheney, Vice President. So that part helped a lot, and there were clear messages sent. I think to the components when we worked together, that this was not about us individually or even our institutions, but it was the mission. So, but nevertheless, I think it shouldn't be kind of depending on the individuals. We have to always think of ways and mechanisms that transcends individual relationships, depending on who the president is or who the ambassador is. That should be. I think there should be a gold war on nickels, if you like, where we had Army, Navy, Air Force, other components. To how do you get them to work in an integrated fashion? It may be that in war zones we need to have a review that's very fundamental, and then comes up with a set of recommendations, rather than leaving it to sort of individual to work it out.
Okay, if I could ask on analysis, going back to the first category, from what I remember, you used to have in the later years an intelligence briefing every morning inside the government from a variety of different agencies all around the table at the same time. What do you look for in a good briefing? What do you consider to be a good briefing?
Well, I consider a good briefing as that it deepens my understanding, widens my horizons. Uh, 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 Often morning briefings are about what is going on, information wise, who's doing what to whom, for example, or if you are in a situation like Iraq or Afghanistan, where kind of violence took place and who was responsible, the government is doing, how the military buildup, which is we were trying to build new institutions, how that is maybe going, what's going on with the other players regionally, or beyond, in terms of creating obstacles for our success, or positive. Uh, I found that internally, sometimes the specific pieces of information were very important because of technical or human. If somebody was working for us, that provided us something as a result. Uh, I was obviously someone with academic think tank, interested in research and analysis. That was sort of what I did growing up, so to speak. So I would sometimes ask for the raw material rather than your interpretation of what you said as an analyst happened. How did you come to this judgment? What was the sources that give you, or made you, or led you to conclude that? Can I see that, or can I listen to it myself? And what was the intonation like? It could be a question, or it could be a definitive statement. So I have to say that occasionally I was some people in the business really liked that because I was taking them very seriously. It was unique, they thought, but others thought it was a pain in the neck, so to speak, to to be that interested in the details. For example, I remember this with regard to Pakistan as a sanctuary, the nascent sanctuary during my time in Afghanistan from 2003 to 2005 as the ambassador, although I had dealt with that before, that that I would get into the weeds with them. I would make that a priority to both understand what's going on, because I had a worry that that sanctuary, if we don't address it properly, it was going to be a big headache. But it was always a good give and take. Sometimes I would, in my last job in government, to negotiate our withdrawal from Afghanistan. I was, we had been there for 20 years by then in Afghanistan, and that we had invested a lot in building their institutions. Essentially, we could say we own some of them. That may not be a proper word, but in effect, we had established it and we had sustained it. And I would be surprised by sort of and the lack of depth, both in terms of what makes groups, people, individuals tick, and how they kind of work it with each other in order to achieve their objective, which they said was the same as our objectives for their country. But in fact, they were working at cross purposes with that. And I would be sometimes impatient, which I did not mean it out of any disrespect for the work they were doing, but that we ought to do better in understanding what and analyzing and having the kind of information that we should have. So, uh, good, solid, but not. But we could have, should have been a lot better, I thought, that time. So this was an issue. Yes.
Maybe then I can ask one last question before we wrap it up. And the question is about expertise. What does it mean to be an expert? What is that in Washington? How often do you find expertise? And I guess the way I want to ask it is to say, do you think that the intelligence that you read in Washington has expertise? And how do you define that? How do you know when you're reading something that's good? How do you know when you're reading good intelligence or good analysis?
Well, my kind of attitude or approach has been the track record of people who you come and see. One of the things that I have regretted is that there isn't a person. Maybe there is, but I didn't find some person like we used to have on the Soviet. I remember from we would have a national intelligence officer, let's say for the Soviet Union. Uh, I remember a gentleman named Fred Ermarth. He was a kind of a national intelligence officer for the Soviet Union. When the coup against Gorbachev happened, Secretary Cheney asked me if I would find out what does the intelligence community think about this coup, and to let them know. So I called Fred, and I said, Fred, what do you make of this coup? The boss wants to know. And he said, not to worry, these guys won't be able to find their a way out of a paper bag, or what is the this is going to collapse. They don't know what they are doing. A clear answer by an informed person that, and I could never find. And I would ask, okay, where is a Fritz Ermarth on Iraq, that if I have a big issue that I can call and say, Paul, what do you make of, and how should I think about it? And have him come to the meeting, the briefing of all these changing individuals, which has some positivity to it, that you get new people constantly, and it takes you a while to find out if they know what they're talking about. So I think we could benefit from having uh, someone who deals with this issue for 20 years, 30 years, knows everything, knows the language, goes frequently, meets with the leaders, and you could have a serious conversation with about uh, uh, the issues affecting the, let's call it, the target country.
Yeah, that was what I thought the job would be when I first started 15
Mhm.
years ago as well, and because that's what I remembered from my mother's generation. People as such as yourself, that's what they did. They worked on an issue for their career because they cared, and that was what mattered.
Yeah.
But
And people in the country knows them, respects them
yes, yes,
when he or she shows up. They have excellent meetings, and so I would say I think of the Fritz Ermarth model, and on the secure phone, right there. I didn't have
that's
the
not
50 people
Washington
in the
today.
room.
That's not Washington today. That doesn't exist so much anymore. That's. Anyways, it's such a pleasure to have you, sir. Thank you so much.
Well,
Hopefully we'll be
thank
able to
you.
talk again. And yeah,
Yeah, all the best to you in your new venture.